Okay, let's get started. Gee, it must be an important bill. We have, what, 4 more people in the audience than we had for the last committee meeting. So, we're improving. So please remember to adjust the chair, silence your cell phones and all of that stuff. Because if you don't, I'll beat up on Representative Washit over it, even if it's not his. So with that, Mark, would you please call roll?
Representative Banks. Here. Representative Conrad. Representative Heiner. Representative Knapp. Representative Larson.
Excused, but I don't really know where he is.
Representative. Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Tarver. Here. Representative Western. Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. Denise or Mark, would you see if you can find out where Representative Larson is? Thank you. So. Yeah, so. This is committee. Okay. Well, with that, Senator Hicks, your bill, we're taking up Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force. So, and you brought an entire team with you. So take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Minerals Committee. You know, this is all my time in the legislature. I think this is only the second time I've ever come before the Minerals Committee, and the first time that had nothing to do with minerals. So it's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee this morning, and just bring you Senate File 169, which is the State Shooting Complex Task Force. Mr. Chairman, I'm just gonna give you a high-level overview of where this idea come from. We have a number of neighboring states that have similar complexes, and I've handed out to you. You should have one of these on your desk. This is a facility to the state to the south of us. And if you look through this and you look at the major events that they host, this is a destination type facility. They have all kinds of shooting matches that come in from all over the United States. Historically, they even had international competitions. But what's happened is because of the unfriendly firearm nature of that state, a lot of these organizations over the years have now started to boycott that facility, associated with magazine bans and this ban and all this other stuff. And, you know, we've tried to market ourselves in the state of Wyoming as a firearm friendly state and bring in manufacturers and stuff. And so the idea of this kind of come from the standpoint that why couldn't Wyoming do something big and have a world-class facility, you know, best in the West, best in the United States. And so the genesis of that came from that. So, Mr. Chairman, I also handed out to you, so it's not just firearms. There's another handout I give you that I want to bring your attention to. And this is the kind of events that we could potentially host, and it's got the Total Archery Challenge. And it shows where these events are hosted around the United States from Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, Vermont, Pennsylvania, Michigan, South Dakota, Colorado, Utah, and Montana. And this rotates around the United States, but we don't have one in Wyoming, and I don't know that we have the facilities or the infrastructure to be able to host these kinds of events. So when we talk about shooting, it's not just shooting, it's all components, including archery, black powder, you know, skeet, the whole component. We want to think big, Mr. Chairman. If we're not going to do it big and do it right, then we shouldn't do it at all. If we can't create a destination type facility that we have, you know, nationwide competitions here, then we probably shouldn't do it, because we'll just be one more in a herd of states that are trying to do these things. So that's kind of where the concept. Mr. Chairman, I'll walk you through the bill now and what the bill does, but I had an opportunity to visit with our chief executive about this, and and got some input before I had the bill drafted up. And the idea is rather than predispose where this facility would be located, is really write the criteria for the facility and then let our local governments compete and work with the private sector. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what we'll do, but I'll just walk you through the bill. It's really fairly simple. It sets up the task force. Mr. Chairman, if you go to page 2, it just says the members of the task force will be the governor or his designee, the director of the Game and Fish Department or his designee, the director of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources or his designee, the Department of Tourism or her designee, 2 members of a firearm archery or firearm accessory company in Wyoming that would be appointed by the governor, 1 member of a shooting sports organization that has representation in Wyoming be appointed by the governor, 1 member of the public representing a hunting or wildlife conservation organization headquartered in Wyoming, 2 members of the House of Representatives, 2 members of the Senate, and this provides how the vacancies would be filled, Mr. Chairman. So the real meat of the task force is to develop the framework for the selection of a location in the state of Wyoming. So let's talk about the context of what that means. If we're going to do this world-class type facility, you have to have at least someplace that you can shoot 2,000 meters over a mile for these type of long ranges. So it's not your normal county shooting range so you're going to have quite a bit of land involved with this type of thing. Again, this is looking at the one down south of us. They have a 2,000 meter range, and it's not what you would normally think of as like a military shooting range. This is on the side of a mountain, and it'll have targets at different ranges and stuff. So you're dealing with the topography, wind drift, all of those things come into play. And so really a very unique setting. It's just like you're outdoors. But what the task force would do is go out there and try to start to establish some of these criteria is you have to have this type of facility or ability to come in that has this terrain, this range, access. Obviously, if we're going to develop this facility, you're going to have water and power to it. There's going to be buildings associated with this because it could potentially be expanded. That's what we want to do is look at long-term as using this as an education facility for conservation education, outdoor education. So we want to build all those components into it, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So that's kind of the framework. If we go over to page 4, we'll go review some of these other facilities so we get a real idea of what we need to do to compete. Romanet 3 is develop requests for proposals, and this is the key component that I think this will be really the meat of the component is start to develop the requirements for this state shooting complex. Just like I said, you're going to have a minimum of 2,000 yards. You're going to have some type of access. You're going to have support system in place. The roads, the infrastructure. Mr. Chairman, if we go down to Romanet 4, when the task force gets done with developing these requests for proposals, they'll be submitted out to our local governments and also industry. And what we want to do is encourage industry partners to participate in this process, and then those counties and cities and municipal governments that may have an interest. What we'd ideally like to see would be have a private sector component and then a local government sector component in there. When I talk about component, I mean skin in the game. Financial contributions may be in the form of maintenance and support. But the task force will put that proposal together, submit that out to all those local and industry entities, and then review those proposals when they come back in, and then make a recommendation. And that recommendation would go back to the Joint Appropriations Committee, the governor, and Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife committees. And then ultimately that decision would move forward as a recommendation after consulting with those both the executive branch and then both the appropriations and the TRW committees prior to any award of the facility. So, Mr. Chairman, if we move on into subsection D, this just says the task force reports back to the governor and the interim committees. And then we go into subsection E, it just provides the framework for the compensation for those members serving on the task force. Subsection C, subsection 2, Mr. Chairman, on page 6 just provides the $40,000 general fund appropriations to the governor's office to provide compensation for those non-legislative members or agency folks. And then section 3 provides the appropriation. And Mr. Chairman, I want to go through that. The committee may want to, excuse me, the committee may want to amend out some of that language where it talks about the $5 million in ARPA. As the budget that we just passed yesterday, it has that $5 million general fund appropriation in the budget now. So I think all that language could go away. And then, Mr. Chairman, if we turn over to page 7, there's also another appropriation, $2,500,000 from the Wyoming Tourism Reserve account, and then $2,500,000 from Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And I'll let the agencies, Mr. Chairman, speak to that. And then, Mr. Chairman, once those are appropriated, they're going to sit in that account. And then after we do the RFPs and develop that, submit that back, review those proposals, make a recommendation back to the legislature, those funds require further legislative authorization. So what we're doing is basically putting $10 million in an account that consists of $5 million of general fund, $2.5 million that Department of Game and Fish would reimburse that through those federal dollars. I'll let the director talk about those, and those $2.5 million of tourism require further legislative authorization. So once the task force develops the RFP, goes out, comes back, the task force then will make a recommendation back to the governor and the legislature. If they see willing to move forward with the project at that time, that's when those funds would become available. Mr. Chairman, that's the bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator, very much. Committee, any questions for Senator Hicks before we go on to the panel he's created here? Representative Larson, so you are here now. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I couldn't stop talking in the breakfast room.
We can fix that. Proceed.
So you recommended pulling the ARPA money out, which I understand where that comes from, but we would also want to remove on page 8, section C, since that no longer applies. That's just the definition of ARPA as well. I just want to make sure that that's good with you when the time comes.
All right. Any other questions for Senator Hicks? So, Senator, I have one. It's not in here, which is usually that statement we put in some of these for accepting private monies, donations, that sort of thing. Would you be amenable to an amendment doing that? We usually say is also authorized to accept, you've seen the wording. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it says if someone wishes to walk in and donate money to the project, that we can accept it.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an excellent idea because we could actually front load that if we awarded something, somebody could make a donation to that account right away. So I think that would be an excellent addition there. So once we go through the RFP and the local sponsor said we've got $1 million, and we've got an industry partner that wants to put $1 million in, that would be a good addition because they could just put it in that account for that expenditure. So
Okay.
I think
All
that's a
right,
good
thank you.
idea.
So anyone else? Okay, with that, don't fight. All of you will get a fair turn. So go ahead, Representative Washut, Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This has been a dream idea of mine since I came to the legislature, the possibility of creating a destination location. And I just want to emphasize the idea that when you look at some of these facilities around the country, Some of them are popular for national matches and regional matches simply because of their size. They have the capacity to bring in large numbers of competitors and get them through the match in a timely manner. Others are selected because they have unique amenities. There are aspects of that range that maybe don't exist in very many other places around the state. So my vision is that we would incorporate much of that, both the size, so we have the capacity to host these big matches, but also some unique features, which I hope the RFP will draw out and the local applications will include some of the things that they may be able to offer at that particular site that may not be offered in some other community. So I really look forward to that RFP process to tease out some of these opportunities that exist in our great state.
Questions for Representative Chairman Washut? So Chairman Washut, I don't know that I would call it a concern, but I guess if you could expand a little bit on it. Would the vision here be just one massive complex or potentially more than one, meaning, as Senator Hicks said, you have a 2,000 meter range for those who like to shoot long range. But what about someone who really is just in love with shooting skeet? And they, may already have some facilities but need to expand.
Excellent question, Mr. Chairman. My vision, and of course, the task force and the process is yet to evolve, but I like the idea of a co-located facility that has state-of-the-art, sporting clays, state-of-the-art long-distance rifles, state-of-the-art multi-gun, state-of-the-art black powder, all co-located in one complex so that it's a name that becomes synonymous with a fantastic facility that rather than having a long-range facility in one corner of the state and a black powder facility in another, my idea, and I think the senator's on board with that, is a co-located facility.
All right. Oh, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Washut, what would be the footprint of such a facility if you co-locate everything in one size? How many acres would you need for that? I've never been to one of these large ranges like this, so just enlighten me a little bit.
Chairman Washut.
The short answer is, I don't know. Yet to be determined, when we see what possibilities exist within our various communities. And, the community that's selected may have the capacity to do much of it, but maybe not all of it, so I think there's a lot yet to be determined, but it will be a substantially sized facility. The one in the state to our south is quite large, goes up a canyon area with lots of ranges off on each side. It's very large, and they can host 2 or 3 regional or national matches simultaneously. So that's the size of facility we're talking about, pretty large.
Thank you. And Representative Heiner, I've been to some of these complexes and they are very large. I think the National Shooting Complex in San Antonio, Texas, can host, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 competitors at a time. So I think you're looking at something, if you want, you're probably looking at a section or more of land. And that ultimately, and they have camping facilities, hotel facilities right near it. And they've turned these into, as the good Senate Majority Floor Leader said, into destinations. So, okay, I'll just go down the row. Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren Westby, Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources Committee. Thanks for having us here today. Thanks to the two sponsors of the bill. This, in our agency, our mission is to impact communities and enrich lives. And a project like this is just spot on with the mission. Then you bring in the Office Outdoor Recreation and all their work to try to get a handle on the beast of outdoor recreation and the growth and the significance of what we have to offer here in the state of Wyoming can be very significant. And so we're proud to be named in the bill to sit on this task force, and we stand ready to be a formidable team when we put this group together. And I really appreciate the at the end of it, the effective immediately date. I think the intent is, once this passes, we'll get the governor to make those appointments and really get to work on this as soon as possible, because it's not an easy lift to begin with, but the impact can be very huge. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, questions for Director Westby? Questions? Okay, Director Schober, it's your turn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Diane Schober, Executive Director at the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And certainly one of the ways in which we grow tourism is by product development and offering things to do, extending that length of stay. Sports tourism and sports tourism marketing is a big and growing opportunity for many of our communities across Wyoming. This particular proposal aligns right within that mission. We have a strategic objective to disperse people to lesser known areas and to give them more things to do. And this is done in partnership with others. So we believe that this could be a great opportunity to grow tourism in a way that broadens that understanding of what really tourism is by bringing in other areas. To speak to the section and the funding, there's through the statewide lodging tax, there is a fund, the Tourism Reserve and Project Account, and that is where the appropriation from Fund 446 would be where this appropriation would is designated. And just to assure you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, working through the budget office and through our fiscal controls, there is more than adequate amount of funding within that account. There are this bill and another bill that are up in this session, and even if both of those would pass, there still would leave at the end of this biennium $5.5 million in that account to start for the next biennium. So we stand in support and are anxious to work with the others on this as well. Thank you.
Questions for Director Schober? Yes, Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question I have, I look down these lists and I see that we have these complexes in states that have adequate population. Are we concerned at all about Wyoming's low population, if this is going to be in effect, and when we have a high tourist time in 3 months, that this is going to be okay for 3 months and then just kind of not get much use throughout the year? Is that a concern at all? Thank you.
Director Schober?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Banks, if this does pass and it comes to fruition, as we all hope it does, is going to require sales and marketing efforts behind it. That's with anything. You can't just build it and assume they will come. We have other large facilities, the Camplex in Gillette, the Sweetwater Event Center in down in the southern part of the state. They have sales teams behind that to bring events to utilize those facilities. And so I would assume that wherever this is located, that would be an area that would need to be addressed by that local community to put efforts behind it. Every one of our communities in Wyoming does have a local lodging tax board and promotion board. Many of them, I think, would be very anxious to see something like this come to fruition in their community.
Okay, other questions for Director Schober? Okay. So Director, you did touch on the one I had some concern over, which was the money coming out of the reserve and project accounts, and you said you have 5 million left. Is that enough buffer? It seems like I've seen a number of bills that seem to want to raid that account because it's there, and we tend to do that a lot. But I want to make sure that you're not shorting yourself for some of these things. I can see the benefit to this, but I want to make sure that we aren't shorting tourism where you really might need the funds at some time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. The reserve account is generating about $6 million a year, so 12 million on the biennium. In the last session, last year, there were projects that were appropriated and approved from that account of 5.7 million, and that left a balance in the account of 6,020,000. And then the projected revenue between February of this year, February of 23, through June of 24 is another $8 million. Subtracting out this project and the outdoor recreation fund, which passed through the House, there's a $6 million appropriation attached to that, would leave on June 30th of 24, 5.5 million. And then you'd start that biennium and probably have an estimated another 12 million in the 25, 26. And so as we look at the projects, I do think the policymakers, you as appropriators, will have to be mindful of the projects that come through that account. But that account was really, the title of it is Reserve and Projects Account. And I think this aligns well with the legislative intent of what that fund was meant to be.
Thank you, Director. That would be my next question then, if this does align with our original intent on that, because we kind of took you off general fund and gave you your own funding, and I just want to make sure that, you aren't being put in a position where you feel you're forced to spend money on certain projects that maybe you didn't have as a priority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said, we support this and we think that it aligns well with the legislative intent of what the project fund is to be used for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? Director Nesvik, your turn.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brian Nesvik, Director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So I've looked at this, and I look at it from the perspective of the department and our mission of conserving wildlife and serving people. I look at it more about the benefits to our state than I do the tourism industry. While the tourism industry is certainly very significant and important to our state, I look at this from the perspective of what we can provide especially our youth in our state. And another facility like this where we can, one of my priority initiatives is Inspire a Kid It's for Life. And that's all about providing kids opportunities, outdoor opportunities, so they become interested and they care they care enough to sit in one of your chairs or to work for my department or join a sportsman organization. And this kind of a facility, I think would be something that would really align well with that initiative and providing some youth education. We could do hunter education, a lot of the activities that we currently support. A lot of our programs have a component of them that are shooting and a component of it that's hunting, fishing, archery, and this aligns well. It would be another opportunity for youth, especially in our state. And then the other thing I think that it reflects is it's having a state-of-the-art facility in Wyoming it really reflects our state's outdoor heritage and our state's commitment to all things wildlife conservation, shooting sports, outdoor natural resources. And so anyway, this does align well as far as the funding goes. The good majority floor leader talked to me prior to putting this bill together, and he has constructed this in a manner that it does not in any way jeopardize our federal funding model for we receive a pretty significant amount of money every year from excise taxes, federal excise taxes on firearms and sporting goods. And there's the way that this is worded works well for the department and for the commission.
Committee, any questions for Director Nesvik? And Director, you answered the question I had, which was, again, the funding, because you don't get any general fund appropriations other than for those licenses that are set aside for certain things. I just wanted to make sure that you aren't shorting the sportsmen in the state in order to come up with $2.5 million.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe this is very well aligned with the other priorities that we invest commission funds in and is good for the sportsmen of our state.
Okay, so any questions? Nope, okay, thank you. And you'd hang with us. But so with that, I will open public comment. I see no other legislators, no one from the governor's office. So with that, anybody wants to speak on Senate File 169? Anyone? One chance. Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Lawley. Seconded by who else but Larson?
We're a tag team.
Yes, I know. So, committee, any discussion before we go through the bill?
Yes.
Okay, Representative Conrad.
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. And to the sponsors of the bill, great job. I just share, as a youth, I grew up near Camp Perry. I don't know if anyone's heard of Camp Perry, but Camp Perry every year is one of the largest. In fact, it's the World Series of shooting sports. They, along with the Civilian Marksmanship Program, bring in over 4,500 participants a year to participate in this, and they attract over as I mentioned, 4,500 people. And to Representative Heiner's question earlier, this area is about 640 acres. But it's amazing the amount of people that they bring in from all over the world. And this is an incredible opportunity to promote Wyoming, our values, our hunting, but also economic development, et cetera. So it's a wonderful, wonderful endeavor. Thank you.
I know there were other, Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing this bill go forward. When I first heard about the bill, it was one of those you think, oh no. But having served on TRW, I appreciate that lodging tax money for tourism is going to expand tourism. And one of the biggest things that we learned, I think, was that as our second leading industry, there are areas of the state that obviously flourish in tourism, but there are other areas of the state that could be directional sites. We visited the hot springs. That was one instance, I think, that is a private-public partnership that, if developed properly, could be a destination, more of a destination site. And this would involve conservation, outdoor education, promoting the Second Amendment, bringing tourism to parts of the state that may not be flourishing from that, and continuing to grow our second leading industry. So I just look forward to this bill advancing.
Other questions, comments? Comment, Representative Lawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really strongly support this effort for all the reasons that we've heard testimony about, and particularly this approach of, let's do a task force. I think the discussion demonstrated why we needed a task force. It's complex. There's a lot of factors. And so again, I appreciate the approach of doing a task force and wanting to do it well and right, to represent our state and to give these opportunities, and particularly to young people.
Okay, Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo the words that have been said. I see this as an opportunity to bring many of the state things that we pride ourselves in this state coming together in one. When we can bring in private industry as well as some industries around the state to promote our state, I think it's going to be a big benefit to us regionally, as we can be competitive with the states around us that do have this, and say, hey, we're the most Second Amendment friendly state around here. Come to us and we'll show you how we work. And I look forward to submitting my application to get this up in the Bighorn Basin. So thank you.
Okay, anyone, Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to submitting my application to get in Southwest Wyoming.
I knew that was coming.
Okay, any other, Representative Western, even if you said, no, you didn't want a chance.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You know, I generally really try to avoid voting for Senate files, but I do think that, you know, the folks who do engage in these kind of things spend a lot of money every year, tens of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. And if we can even capture 10% of that here in state with a local spend, I think that's a really big deal, and that's good for our state and good for our brand. So that's why I'm voting aye.
Anyone else? Senator, I do have a question for you, and I think I already know the answer, but I'll just put it out there. The intent here is not to have the state operate this, if we come up with a state shooting complex. Am I correct? It would be for a local entity, whether it's the local government or a private enterprise or something else, to push this forward and operate it?
Mr. Chairman, that decision hasn't been made. And so what I would hope we would come back with is through that rigorous RFP proposals to see what those local communities are willing to bring. You know, I don't want to predispose anything of the outcome. I want to allow the maximum amount of creativity and participation. And so, you know, we very well could end up on a state park. I'm just thinking, you know, it could be Boyson, someplace like that we build out a section up there. So I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't want to presuppose and say it's going to be operated by state parks. I say let's put the proposal out there and see what we can find out.
Okay, all right. So, and committee, a while ago in my community, and we have at least a nice long-range shooting facility. It's not really well developed. It's a little rustic, but it's still a good one. The community had to pass on what would have been an Olympic preliminary qualifying shoot because they weren't able to address all the issues. And there would have been approximately 350 competitors come in for 3 days. And most of these people, frankly, they aren't poor boying it. When you have a shotgun that you've paid $25,000 for, you really are well into the competitive nature of the sports. So any other comments, questions? Okay, we'll go through the bill. Page 1. Page 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. Okay, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to move an amendment to delete on page 6, lines 19 through 23. Then on page 7, lines 1 through 3. And then on page 8, lines 1 through 6.
Mark, do you have that? Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
just a minute, Senator. There's a motion on the table. Does anyone want to second the motion? Is there a second?
I'll second it, but subject to question later. But
Okay, seconded by Lolly. Senator, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the motion's in order other than, and I would have to get direction from LSO, while there's $5 million in the budget, I don't know that you would want to take that out of the bill at this point in time.
Okay.
So I think you want to get rid of all the ARPA language in there and leave the 5 million in there. Otherwise, you're going to have a disconnect between if the bill passes and what's in the budget. And so it's not a new $5 million. It just says that 5 million in the budget's obligated in the bill. And maybe what you would want to do is put controlling language, either the budget controls or the bill controls, Mr. Chairman, just to make it clear that that 5 million in the budget's allocated through this. So just a suggestion.
Thank you, Senators. Representative Lolly.
That was exactly my question, and I couldn't even offer a friendly amendment, but subject to some controlling language. But that was my concern, is we should probably leave it in there, but make sure it's clear it's not duplicative of what's already in the supplemental budget. But that was really my question.
So I think what we're potentially looking at is that may be better held as a committee of the whole amendment where it can be better developed rather than on the fly here in this committee. So
Mr.
we do have
Chairman.
yes.
I could just respectfully withdraw my amendment at this point.
Okay, withdrawn by the sponsor. How's the co-sponsor feel on that? The second?
Well, I feel like there's parts of the amendment that we need to keep, so I don't know if I want to withdraw it in whole, because unless we want to do all of it in whole committee, the whole we can, whichever is your pleasure. I'm fine to withdraw.
Okay, then I will look for the two of you to come up with the correct language on a committee of the whole amendment. Okay?
I'm getting good at that.
Yeah, I know. I know I do that, but if it gets to be a little bit of a complicated amendment, you're better off spending a little extra time developing it and do it that way than try to do it on the fly in the committee. So, page 7. Okay. And I will look at a potential amendment. And again, I don't have the exact wording, so I'll hold it for committee of the whole or second or third reading, which says you can accept private money going to the account. Senator, is that acceptable to you?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, because there's a format we use for those, and LSO has it. We put it in a number of different bills, so.
Mr. Chairman, would
Yes.
you like us to include that, and then we'll just do one committee of the whole amendment?
You can do that, yes.
I'll do it.
And I would say get LSO's input, because there's
Yes.
almost standard language anymore
Yes.
for that. Okay, so page 7, page 8. Again, that follows with the amendment. Committee?
Question.
Question being called. Mark, would you call roll on Senate File 169, Engrossed State Shooting Complex Task Force.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Western. Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
9-0, do pass.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
thank
I
you,
look
Senator,
forward
very
to
much.
Continuing to work with you on this project as it evolves.
Okay, and committee has passed Senate File 169, State Shooting, Engrossed State Shooting Complex Task Force. And with that committee, that's the only thing we had today. We are adjourned.